And
Great.
we're live with the great coach Josh Wood. So, where are you located? I didn't quite find that. Maybe I missed.
It's a little tricky. So I live in Tasmania, Australia. So
That's
Tasmania
where
is
I
an
saw that.
island state, about 150 k's. Yeah. So
As soon
it's
as you
off
said
the
that, I
south end of
remember.
Australia.
Yeah, it was something
You keep,
crazy like Tasmania. Wow, wow, man, that's wild. Why did you decide to go over there?
I've been in Australia since 2008.
Oh, okay,
So been here for quite a while.
cool.
Yeah. So I moved here. Um, I finished high school. I'm from the U.S. originally. I grew up in Minnesota.
Huh.
And I finished high school and I bounced. I ran off to the UK with a backpack and was over there wandering around and just doing the live in hostels, hitchhike, work under the counter for cash experience kind of thing. Just disappear over there.
Damn, dude.
Met an Australian girl, moved to Australia.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's wild. You really live what you preach then, because you're still backpacking today.
Always.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah. Been doing it for years.
Years. That's awesome. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very flat here in Florida. I'm out here in Arapahoe, which is away from a lot of the urbanization.
Yeah.
We see the water here, so I'm on the Gulf, but it's super flat. There's some good trails. I love going on trails. I run on trails. Most of the land here is like obviously it's the U.S., right? It's Native American land, but like Arapahoe stands for
Yeah.
like a Native American Chief Arapahoe, and for whatever it's worth,
Okay.
it's got kind of like a special vibe, I think, to some of the areas around. Um, but anyways, man, I was looking at your website and kind of reading through some of the blogs and stuff, and you said you had like this huge blog on fuck burpees.
Yes.
And you made a really good argument, and it's something I've never been exposed to because I never got thrown through the ringer of like having a shitty trainer try to train
Mm.
me, you know um you know
Yeah.
not trying to be mean or whatever, but I was fortunately, like, when I got into movement, um I played baseball growing up and stuff, and I was a pretty good athlete naturally in running and in playing baseball particularly, and I stopped because it didn't really make sense to continue playing sports in a high school. And by that time, I was reading so many books that I didn't care about like the development of the physical body at that time any longer. I was just like reading like
Yeah.
Nietzsche, and had like a girlfriend that was older than me, so I was like the coolest thing in the world. Like I thought I was the coolest thing in the world already. So I like I got rid of my Xbox.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, I got rid of my Xbox right away, and I was just like, I'm good, man. I'm gonna be fine for a while. But anyways, around probably like 18 or so, you know, just randomly doing things in the gym, and innately knew for the longest time. And maybe you've had this feeling, or maybe some people get an injury and then they kind of get a wake up calls. But rather than a wake up call, I had an instinct, like an intuition, like I usually do about things, that this whole gym shit isn't gonna like work for me as far as like treating the body like a lever system specifically. I didn't know that was the case, and I do barbell lifts and stuff like that. And, if I had some good PTs around, I'd probably mess with some of that stuff too. Like if you were around me, I'd be like, hey man, just tell me whatever you think is I should know, and I'll do it. I won't question you. But, I like to experiment from that angle. But I stopped for a while, and then I got into have you ever heard of Rolfing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I got into
Yeah, I know Ralph.
I basically got into Rolfing, like doing Rolfing, and that became a whole thing in itself. Like, oh my God, look at all these changes, you can experience with your body doing that, which is essentially the same thing I'm experiencing
Yeah.
now with movement. And I think you're kind of on that same wavelength, that movement is like a meditative, transformative experience.
Yeah.
And you use
I think
like,
it's a requirement.
yeah, yeah. And you have good training. I don't know what your background is specifically. Are you just like a trainer? You have good thinking, like almost I thought you were like a PT, like a really good PT. I'm not sure.
My my background is weird. So I started off, like, my physical journey started off in mixed martial arts. I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai and shit for years and years, and then finally settled on like boxing. But I started learning that stuff when I was about 17. At the time, I was working in a computer shop, fixing and building computers in high school. I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I think there's more to this. And so I did some research, found an MMA gym in Rochester, Minnesota, which was really just like a little square of mats in the back of a old Irish family boxing gym.
Uh-huh.
But I pursued that for a long time, and then I was like, okay, this is interesting. So I'm learning about the body through action, but I want to learn how to fix it, to work with it. And so actually, my first career was massage. I worked and ran a clinic. I taught massage in Melbourne for about 6 years. So I
Yeah,
ran
I
the manual
remember.
therapy stuff.
There's a
While I
photo
did
of you.
that, I
There's a
started
photo of you. Yeah,
sort of
where you said
delving.
you were a teacher. I think in the same photo, did you get an acupuncture too?
Yeah. So I did my bachelor's degree in health science and Chinese medicine.
Uh,
So trained acupuncturist herbalist.
that's cool, man. Very cool. Very eclectic. Yeah, my background as a body worker,
Yeah.
just like you. Um, I didn't get the opportunity to teach, partly because business was good and I was just busy working on people. But I would love that opportunity to, maybe I will in the future, to like teach manual therapy techniques, because as far as like
It's
geeking out
such
on
a good
stuff,
thing.
yeah, manual therapy techniques are super, super interesting. Like the different effects you can cause on the body. Um, and once I got a good understanding of like some of the, like I took a course with Syzygy, it was a biomechanics course a couple years ago, and they taught a lot of assessment, like hip
Yeah.
positioning, but they framed all the manual techniques and even all the corrective exercises on how it affected very specific structural imbalances. So like they'll do like
Yeah.
a mobilization for the hip to affect an anterior tilt of the hip. And once you start thinking that,
Yeah.
you any technique you can apply to, oh, this seems to work good for this or that. With rolfing, it's a little
Hmm.
bit different. It's not really just a technique. You have this tool, which is your hands, and it's essentially more like just reshaping the body, like
Mm.
non-surgically. You're using your hands like as a scalpel,
Yeah.
and you're kind of like you're releasing the muscles in a certain sequence for the most optimal reshaping of the body into a structurally sound position. Did you get super clinical?
And
I'm
Rolfing's
assuming,
at 12 stage, right?
yeah, I actually didn't study like rolfing. I studied a form of structural
Yeah.
integration that came from Don McCann.
Yeah.
It was third down from a
Yeah.
guy who studied rolfing named Jack Painter, which was called postural
Yeah.
integration.
Cool.
Yeah, and Don's cool because he
Yep.
integrated basically like structural integration with the cranial mobilizations, and he's like, hey, side bends, torsions in the knee, um, side bends in the rib cage, torsions in the knee, uh, internal arm rotations, different postural collapses. They can all be traced back to your cranial alignment. And if you mobilize the cranium, you're going to get a subtle shift or major shift in the posture immediately. And I mean, I found that to be the case, and it's one of the things that I think is still kind of esoteric in the field of manual therapy is how to use the cranium as a tool. Because I don't think cranial sacral has
Hmm.
really succeeded in doing that and using it as like a clinical tool that like a structural integrator would use. But was that your same like your same way of working at that time in your life? Was like how to integrate structure?
Yeah. It was, well, it's very clinical. So here in Australia, we have what we call massage therapy, just generalized manual therapy stuff. And then we have remedial therapy, which is, I think in the US, they call it orthopedic massage or
Yeah,
orthopedic manual
medical
therapies.
massage or
So it's
orthopedic
that real.
massage. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, so it's very much like you were talking about, based on assessments, looking for asymmetries or dysfunctions, and then treating accordingly. Um, and it was interesting because I worked in that field for about 7 years, and I taught for about six of those. And it was one of those things where, like, I got into it and I'm like, man, answers. There's answers everywhere, like all these problems, and look at all these answers I have. And then I start digging more and more into it. I start looking at the science. And for me, I mean, science is an amazing tool because it's just, look, we can catalog information in a very systematic, systematic way. So I can go, okay, what what does all the information say on a topic as far as we know? And the more I looked into pain science, the more I realized that none of the there's very little evidence that shows that biomechanical asymmetries or the biomechanical model of pain really works.
Uh-huh.
Like you look at all these studies where you see like just about everybody over 30 has disc issues or rotator cuff issues, and only about 14% of that nearly 90% actually have pain because of it. It's like,
Right.
well, so then what
Right.
are these asymmetries that we're treating, and do they actually help?
Right.
And so after I started digging into that stuff, I was
Mm-hmm.
like, maybe this isn't the way to go. And that's why I moved into movement, because movement is all about function. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, can you do the thing pain free and elicit the result you want? Yes, then don't mess with it.
Mm-hmm.
No, figure out what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to this idea of looking for something that's asymmetrical and assuming it's going to cause issue later on. But for me, it's really about function. Can you do the thing? If
Mm-hmm.
not, then we fix. If
Mm-hmm.
yes, we leave it, work on other stuff.
Totally agree with you. Totally agree with you on that. Definitely. If you can improve function, you're pretty much going to be happy even without manual therapy, and that usually kind of pisses
Yeah.
clinical manual therapists off because a lot of them really believe that
Yeah.
people need manual therapy, and that's not totally the case. Manual therapy is what I call like an intervention therapy or an expedient.
Yep.
That's kind of how I like an intervention to maybe like open up a new window to rewire a new pattern with movement, either deliberately through training or subconsciously through basically hoping that something sticks, pretty well. And you could have like a whole
Yeah.
army Swiss knife of some of those powerful tools, and then hopefully you can like really get the body to like with repeated stimulus to start to change its function. And there's some philosophies that structure begets function, but I never well, I'm not going to say I never agree with that. I thought that was true for a while because I was from confirmation bias and Dunning-Kruger, lack of experience, particularly with movement. But what's actually the case is that structure and function, I think, are co-emergent. And with function, specifically with movement, because of the subjectivity of movement, as far as like how the brain rewires itself in the face of a new stimulus, that seems to be to use more of the brain than receiving manual therapy techniques on the table. Therefore, it's going to create a bigger change as far as like
Yeah.
how it affects your life. Would you agree with that thinking?
Yeah, yeah, I think that that's a pretty solid line of thinking. And then I'm always open to the idea that, you know, if there was one way to do everything, there'd only be one type of therapy or one type of movement. So I like to go, all right, this is the way I think it is. This is what the evidence says. I attack it in that fashion. If it doesn't work, try something else.
Right.
And it's like you're gonna probably run into issues where because people are so variable, you'll be like, okay, this is the way it works for 99.9% of people. But because of the way the mind works in this individual and their relationship with their body, we got to do something completely different. Even if it doesn't make sense based on the evidence, it makes sense based on them and their particular situation.
Right. Right. Yep. Indeed. So I'm curious, man. You practice jujitsu, so I'm a white belt. I've been practicing for like maybe like truly practicing less than 6 months because the lockdown got in the way of that. But when I have,
Yeah.
it's been consistent, and I've enjoyed it a lot. And it was a goal of mine to basically start practicing in my biomechanics journey. I digress, but basically, like after Rolfing, I got into movement through a guy named Stevie Linton, a really good friend of mine, phenomenal mover, is a second degree black belt in jiu-jitsu, and he taught me all about basically like function, right? Function of the body,
Yeah.
and that had that mind-blowing experience that kind of helped develop the perspective that I just told you about why I think movement is probably the bigger thing that's going to move the dial than if you just had manual therapy. Like if I were to take the two, I'd pick movement if I had to. But anyways, I'm curious, man. So how is your experience like in the martial arts, you know, including jujitsu? But I'm most curious about why boxing, especially after studying jujitsu. Why is boxing the thing that your heart, that kind of captured
Oh,
your heart?
man, that's an interesting one because it doesn't. I mean, this is a very subjective experience. Um, I started off in MMA, so mostly a standing game. My coach uh, is a black belt in jiu-jitsu from Brazil, and he had the big ground game, but for whatever reason, I was more comfortable standing, as most people are when they start off. And so I spent a bunch of time in MMA and slowly developing my ground game. And I moved into strictly jujitsu for a few years because I got tired of getting punched in the head. I'm like, this does not seem good for me. I'm a skinny guy with a skinny neck, and back then I was really small. Like when I competed in jiu-jitsu, I was competing under 64 kilos with a double weave gi on. Like I was tiny. Uh, so what's six? That's like 135 pounds or something. Um, pretty small, pretty lean way back then. This is almost 10 years ago, and like I got into jiu-jitsu because I didn't like being punched or getting hit in the head. I'm like, this is not good. But then I kept getting injured in jiu-jitsu, and I was like, what's going on here? And eventually, like I just kind of you do the thing where you tape yourself up and you keep going. But I actually left jujitsu because of politics in the
Mm,
various gyms. The politics down where I was training in Melbourne were they're just bad. Like, working at a gym to cover the beginners and intro classes in MMA while the coach was in Thailand training for a fight, and then coming back and them being like, so originally it was like it's like, hey, we'll give you $15 a session to cover these, just to cover your time, blah blah blah, and then coming back and being like, oh, we can't actually do that. It's not allowed or whatever, and like getting getting up to your blue belt grading and like tapping out all the blue belts, and then the coach being like, oh no, we can't actually grade you because you haven't been at this gym long enough. I'm like,
yeah,
man,
yeah,
this is bullshit.
yeah. I'm probably gonna
Lots of
leave it.
politics, and
Yeah, that's probably gonna happen to me.
yeah, it's
'Cause,
tricky.
yeah, because I may not stick with this gym for a while. I mean, I'm gonna end up moving, you know, soon, and even if I don't quite get my blue belt, I would be starting at a new gym as a white belt. You know,
Yeah,
it's
and I
fun.
did that a lot because I moved around a lot.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay.
But to actually answer the question about boxing is just, I don't know what it is, but it is just something that really resonated. And I'm very technically minded. I like the intricacies and the subtleties of the sport. I like the art of it. I'm not I'm not a great fighter because I'm there for the the exploration. I'm not mad enough to be a fighter anymore. Like when I was competing, I was in my mid 20s, and everyone I was competing against was like in their late teens, early 20s, and they're angry. And these are guys that are like trying to go pro and make a career out of this. And I'm like, I'm here for the experience. I'm here because it's good to get punched in the face, and it's good to hit someone, and like this is exploration for me. I'm here to learn what I can from this experience. And I realized that that didn't work well, but the 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 embodiment of like this perfection of movement and learning how to like transfer energy and force through two things. It's like fencing. It's like you have one objective, make these hit someone else. And
Mhm.
the whole thing is you have to get your entire body to do that.
Yeah.
It's not about the hands, it's about everything but the hands. They're just there for the ride. And there's just something about that way of moving and this sort of this process of channeling force through the body is like, this is fun. And then it's tactical. Like I like the tactical side of it, the planning, the strategy, the technique. It's all just very interesting to me. And I always come back to it. Like I do everything in waves where I'll do boxing for a while and then I'll focus on weight training, and then I'll go and do some unconventional training for a while and then come back around to boxing, and just keep keep moving in a way that makes me have to think.
That's cool, man. Yeah, that's kind of what I try to do too. You know, I got into compound lifts like 2 months ago because I can't help it, man. I need to have a dialectic with my life. You know, I need to have a questioning, a line of thought, a line of questioning with everything that I'm doing. and compound lifting was like the most heretical thing I could do at the time, so I did it, and it's been great. I haven't had any problems,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
have no problems, and there's a lot of people that think that you'll just fucking melt as far as the ability to like transfer force through your body if you start doing compound lifts. But granted, one thing I haven't been doing as much, like I'm not doing endless repetitions of isolating muscles to like get that sarcoplasmic response
Yeah.
and increase the size. If I'm doing chiseling,
Yeah.
I use ancient stuff, like I use clubs and the
Yeah.
mace, maybe I'll
Yeah.
swing a kettlebell, and I have a pretty good base at, biomechanical stuff with like a kettlebell or a dumbbell or something like that. But chiseling, I like getting those reps in. Lately, especially since I have the equipment, I've loved swinging mace. I love the meal. I've loved the
Yeah.
swing most recently. It's phenomenal, phenomenal. But from what I hear you saying with boxing, I like what you say, because you're basically, you said, yeah, you want it to make you think, but the way that you're talking about, at least the way I heard it, is really just trying to stay close to a way of experiencing movement that keeps you kind of connected with movement in the most visceral way possible, and that keeps all your senses kind of involved, and therefore your brain is going to like have that ready to have that light bulb go off over and over and over and over again. And that's what it's like with me doing
Yeah.
something that looks redundant, or simple, like a compound lift in the gym. My brain feels like it's growing just because it's something that is
Yeah.
making me think at the time. And that's a lot of how I felt with everything else before that I'm not doing currently. Like I'm not doing unilateral swings with a kettlebell that much right now, but there was a time where I did a lot of them because it was kind of like lighting up my brain. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. I get that.
yeah. With jujitsu, what kind of injuries did you get? And would you ever join a jujitsu gym if you felt like there was no politics involved? You know what I mean? Like, would you ever try the sport again, or is grappling something that you just don't even want to worry about anymore? You don't really care that much.
I love grappling. I like the sport and the art and the experience. Often it comes down to a financial thing because gyms are very expensive here and few and far between. Where boxing was one of those things like there's a boxing gym everywhere. Uh, the injuries I sustained were pretty commonly wrist injuries,
Uh,
and I did what happened now? Wrist, a little bit of elbow, and I burst my eardrum once,
ooh,
uh, and that was just a fluke. Yeah, it was. Uh, I had back control, and a guy like threw me back, and my head hit the mats on the side, and just pop.
shit.
So it was like full flush with
Yeah,
the ear.
I guess that's why
Um,
people wear
Many
earmuffs
years ago,
when they roll. They have like those protection over their ears.
oh, I mean that's more for cauliflower ear.
That's
The
what I
wrestlers
thought
headgear
first, but
because
it
it stops your ears
but it
bleeding.
would prevent a
Yeah,
ruptured eardrum, maybe a little bit of
yeah, it would,
yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
But it only happened the once. It was a weird fluke. It healed up fine. It's just for like 4 weeks. Everything sounded like I was underwater.
yeah.
Um, yeah, like I've considered getting back into grappling. Like every once in a while, I'm like, yeah, it feels like a good time to do it, and then it just doesn't. There doesn't arise a good opportunity without me having to travel super far to go.
Got you.
And so it's like, is it worth the effort? How much do I really care? And then when I do that, it takes away from all the other things I want to do. And it's like, I'd really just rather be outside with a backpack these days. I want
Yeah,
to lift some heavy shit, and then I want to go walking in the bush.
yeah,
That's it. I don't want to garden. And it's
yeah.
like, jujitsu takes a
Good.
lot of investment in time and recovery. And like, I've done that, and I think I might come back to it later in my life because it is great for the body, but not where I'm at right now.
Got you. Um, so there's a couple things I want to ask. Um, let's start here. So when you're working with clients, one thing that struck me when I was looking through your website that is that you definitely have really thought out your approach, and as far as like how you work, as a specialist, you have a thought out approach. You clearly have done a lot of self-reflecting. You wrote that funny post, fuck burpees, and then like the post itself was like a super long like breakdown of like all the problems. Like even
Treat suck.
yeah, the weird cultural elements of like punishment, you know, with burpees and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
working with clients, you're probably doing more work online. You know, right now, I don't know if you're back in the gym now, but what populate, like what kind of clients do you work with? Is it like athletes, people with injuries? Is it everybody, young and old?
Mm.
Um, and what is your approach in your own words? Because I define as like well thought out, targeted, methodical, but also um, like you said, not like cookie cutter. You know, it's specific to what's going on. You know, what's maybe needed, drawing from all of your experience. So, like, how would you define the way you work with clients, or just what has helped you basically be successful?
Ooh. Well, it's kind of interesting. So, like my average client is what we call general population, average individual. Most of the time, I get people who are not interested in the gym or haven't previously been interested in the gym.
Okay.
So, because of the way I sort of uh, the way I work and the way I portray how I work, it attracts people who are kind of afraid of the gym. They're not really sure, like they want to do something, they want to get healthier, they want to get fitter, they might have a physical goal, but they're like, I've never liked gyms. And because I'm very much based in the outdoors world as well, that attracts a lot of people who are kind of like, oh, this is something different and new, which is good. That's really what I love. I love doing is because I teach um, the personal training courses as well, and working with people in the gym. I'm working from two angles to bring people into a world of health and wellness through exercise. So I like working with that population, and I like working with adventure athletes, people who are like I've had two people this month who are like, okay, I have X backpacking goal. I'm going on a 6-day trip here. I'm going on a 4-day trip here. I want to make sure that I'm not injured. I want to make sure that I get through it feeling great and awesome and not regretting my decision. Cool. So let's train for that. And that includes in gym and out of gym stuff, everything from diet, lifestyle type, diet and lifestyle type things to how to pack, pick a backpack, all that kind of stuff. And then on trail training as well. So that's like the stuff that I really love doing. The bulk of my work is working with the general population, people who are looking for a way to be active that doesn't feel like boot camp or bodybuilding, because it seems to be the dichotomy. It's like either it's working so hard that you're going to give yourself a hernia and end up in a pile of your own vomit, or it's bodybuilding and you're going to get so massive that you're going to have to buy new clothes and your arms are going to get too big for your shirts. And it's like neither of those things are realistic, and neither of them are uh, lifelong.
Yeah.
They're always limited by how much you can do. And it's like most people don't want either of those. There's that group of people who feel like they need to punish themselves for eating that extra donut, and they can go to F45, they can go to a boot camp. That's fine. It's not my thing. Um, so I really take everything back to the individual goal, and everything for me is all about that first session where we ascertain what the goal is, and really, really specifically. And some of the best people I work with are those that are like, I just want to be able to go for a hike and not have my knees hurt, or I want to be able to, play with my grandkids and not feel winded, or walk up the stairs at work, or fit in my suit better. Like really just simple lifestyle based, but very measurable goals. Those are the best because they're little things that just make people's lives a little bit more miserable, and they're very simple to fix with some simple lifestyle changes and some gym work. And my goal really is ultimately to ascertain goals, to reach those goals, but do it in such a way that we've built a foundation for lifelong movement. I don't care what people do. If you want to do yoga, you want to do Pilates, health, you want to do Zumba, whatever. Just do something, be active, find something that makes you feel alive. And if I can help people sort of learn what their bodies can and should do through little changes in diet over time, learning how to sleep better, learning how to move in a way that makes them feel invigorated and powerful. Like it's all about like giving them this nugget that if they decide no longer to train with me, or they move or I move, they can go and take all those lessons and just keep doing them. It should be about longevity. It's about always being able to move and actualize what your body can do.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. That's a great answer. Great answer. Uh, as well, in that same vein, you were talking about backpacking. I read some of your blogs on backpacking. You have really interesting like detail lists on like stuff to bring, like stuff I've never even heard of. You know, things that I'd consider if I ever went, you know, hiking anywhere long. I'd probably go to your blog or send you a message or something like that, because uh, it's like you really go into it, like quantifying like how to make the whole thing work, which is cool. Do you ever go on hikes with people? Have you done that?
Well, I've worked as a wilderness guide for the last 2 years, so
Oh,
I've
okay.
worked professionally taking groups of up to 14 people out on luxury escapes for 4 days in the wilderness. But
Cool.
that's lodge based, so it's not like tent based stuff. I've definitely gone out with people as uh, sort of like an intro, like, hey, you want to learn how to backpack, whatever. We got some friends into it when we lived in Canada, and they're still going. And so I get out with people when I can, a bit less these days, obviously, because you're not allowed to do much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but more so, it's been on the guiding side of things, and then training people in their own lives and in the gym and that stuff for their own adventures. At some point, I'd like to start running like training camps where we do say 6 to 8 weeks of in gym and on trail training to then conquer a 3, 4, 5, 6 day sort of trip later down the line. But right now, the logistics are pretty hard with group numbers and coordinating all that.
Yeah. Got it. Interesting, man. Really, really interesting stuff. What is something in your like? What is your overall? How does your training look like right now? Like, what are you doing right now? What do you like? What do you like doing
Personal training, like what I do.
on yourself? Like on yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The last sort of 6 months has been all sort of what would you call it? Like capacity building, general GPP, general physical preparedness. So lots of mace work and hiking and rucking and that kind of thing. And then in the gym, it was a lot of kettlebell type stuff. So just building capacity. I competed in powerlifting a handful of years ago for about 3 years and ended up with some back injuries that just have always been problematic. And that's, because of my own way of delving into the world of going hard and fast and not really realizing, you know, how to recover about, proper, periodization and progression. I just kept lifting heavier and heavier and heavier.
So what
And then
is
one
that?
day
What
my
is that?
back's like,
What is that? Tell me
nope.
about that. How do you avoid getting injured powerlifting? Looking back on it, what would you get advice? Would you give to yourself?
Uh, Probably spend more time building work capacity. That's
Okay.
probably the big thing. So I went into powerlifting. It came out of when I was teaching massage. I had a student who was a great big Samoan guy. He was also blind, and he's a world class, world record holding powerlifter.
Mm.
And he was one of my massage students. And he's like, hey man, let's go lift some weights sometime. I'm like, yeah, all right, cool. And I was really into jujitsu at the time. Uh, and so I started training with him and I learned how to do all the main lifts and started lifting. And I basically went from uh, only a like brief introduction to how to deadlift to 3 years later pulling triple body weight. So I was 70 kilos and I pulled 210 kilos in competition.
Okay.
Uh,
That's crazy.
so yeah, so it was like I had some natural aptitude for certain things,
Yeah.
but that kind of progression left me pretty beat up.
Hell
Uh,
yeah, man.
yeah,
Dang.
pretty beat up. Like I just kept getting all these niggles, and basically I have the video of the day that my back went out, and it was like I was deadlifting. I don't know if it was like sets of fives or tens or something at just over double body weight. And I don't know what it was, but that evening after training, I laid on the ground and I couldn't get up. My back just seized up and had never been the same since. It was like 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, so the big thing I didn't do was really, I didn't have the background in in like general physical preparedness. I didn't have the work capacity. I just kept going heavier and heavier at pretty low rep ranges. And it seems, this is from my own self-diagnosis, is that essentially the soft tissues, the connective tissues that hold your joints together, they don't adapt very quickly. They take a long time, whereas
Yeah.
muscle can adapt very quickly. And the loads I was putting my lower back under were quite massive for such a little guy. And I just don't think the soft tissues, the connective tissues, really were able to hack it in the long run. I think I put too much um, focus on, letting the ligaments do more work than they need to.
Yeah.
And so on and off over the years, I've really had to take time away from barbell training. I go do something else. I come back to it
Yeah.
because I think strength is a requirement for optimum living.
Yeah.
And so these last 6 months have been really good because I've been able to just focus on capacity building. I swing maces, I swing kettlebells, I hike with a weighted pack. I do a ton of digging and gardening and,
So
yard work
capacity,
type
is that
stuff.
like endurance
Then,
under load? Endurance under load, would you define it?
yeah, yeah, you could say endurance under low capacity is just the ability to keep doing something for a long period of time, no matter what it is. So you could have a great
Yeah.
aerobic capacity if
Yeah.
you're a runner.
Yeah.
You could have a great anaerobic capacity if you're a CrossFitter. So just building that ability to sustain effort over time. And so now I'm back doing a barbell strength program. I retested my numbers a couple weeks ago, spent a couple weeks just focusing on getting my technique right because it's been probably a year since I've been doing a lot of barbell stuff. And I feel awesome. It feels really good.
That's probably where
So
I'm
it's back
at.
on a strength cycle.
Yeah, I don't want to like over exceed myself because I know that in the beginning you'll like gain strength pretty fast, especially if you're forming
Yeah.
good. I've been pretty fun. I've been okay, like really good, and but I don't want to be deceived by that to the point where I just do too much. You know what I mean? So I always try to, one rule that I try to follow is like 75% of capacity. And if I do a PR, I'm not PRing super above whatever I just was. But I am kind of
Yeah.
a newbie. Do you have like any resources, or is there anything that you've written, as far as like a good, like sound perspective on progressively developing strength, like with compound lifts? What do you like resource wise?
Um, can't think of anything. Like I've got a blog post on just putting together a good individual training session, but nothing on the capacity building side. I'm trying to think. It's just more of like right now I'm doing a course, a graduate certificate in strength and conditioning, and it's really just like delving into research on topics and synthesizing answers to problems out of it. And so one of the things you look at is just like how to develop this GPP. And one of the most interesting units we've been looking at is tactical athletes. And if you look at the research on tactical athletes, so military, fire, police, that kind of thing, like
Yeah.
it's all about building this massive work capacity and absolute strength. Because essentially, if you can pick up, 200 kilos off the ground, you could pick up a 70-kilo person and carry them out of a building, no problem.
Right.
So the idea that if you create a bigger container for the amount of force you can produce, anything less than filling up that container is easier. The bigger your container gets, the easier that becomes.
Right.
But
And
you also have
principle,
to build it
yeah,
up
that principle is
in
really
width.
important. Yeah. To understand that. That's good.
Yeah, and that capacity is like the width of the container. It's like it can be really tall. You have a lot of force production, but if you don't have a lot of width, you can only produce that much force so many times before something breaks down. And so what I'd say in the early days, but I mean, you're better off than I was because you have a more of a movement background in many styles. For me, it was at that point just jujitsu and massage.
Mm.
Um, so it was just kind of
You got
like
into
you got a bit
powerlifting
more
first.
capacity building. You've been working with kettlebells. And, what was that?
You got into powerlifting first, like as far as like a training methodology, outside of martial arts.
Yeah, I did some basic gym work, but it was my first like really focus on strength. Prior to
Yeah.
that, it was like just general gym work, learning how to move, building a little muscle mass, but like focusing on strength, it was a whole other world.
You know what,
Um,
Josh? I light
honestly,
bulb
I would.
just went off completely. A lot of the Palawani traditions, in India and in Iran with meal and saying,
Yeah,
that's all capacity load stuff. Like they want you to be able to swing something a lot before you graduate in weight.
Yeah.
So like there was a
Yeah.
recent post on Persian yoga from Kashi, and they even had like specific numbers. Is like you should be able to press the sang without touching your body and without the sang touching each other. These are like the big shields. They're like, I don't know if no one has seen this. I think everyone's seen this. It's on my Patreon, but for your
Yeah.
audience, they're giant shields. That is the first thing that they introduced to people in the strength and conditioning, ancient strength and conditioning system from ancient Iran. And they're like literally like look like you're pressing tables that have a handle in the center, but you just have to press that
Yeah.
50 times without them touching your body, touching each other, or touching the ground before you graduate in weight. And with the meal, you should be able to like swing the meal very comfortably. I know the exact number, but you should have your pinky underneath it, you know, and I know that kind of like helps you help measure, you know, whether or not you can actually handle the weight, is if you can have that pinky grip too. It's like kind of an assessment. So anyways, just the whole point is, you know, capacity to live seems to be really built into these ancient systems. So I think it seems like a
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about what they're for, it's for tactical athletes. They're warriors or wrestlers, combat athletes,
Right.
and you
No.
need massive capacity to save your joints. Like that's how you build strong connective tissue, is that repetition, and then increasing in load. I think the rep range that they typically work in is excessive for modern, like based on our modern evidence. Like you don't need to do 50s, you need to be able to do like 10 or 12, and then we know you can graduate a bit. But
Right.
it's safe and it's effective,
Very
and
safe.
it's there for a reason.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you. I just didn't want to forget the thought. Sorry, man. Like the weather totally did like a
Yeah.
180-degree turn when I was doing the interview with you. I don't think it's gonna rain within 10 minutes, but it's like it's gonna fucking storm. Really. You know what? I'm probably gonna. Sorry. Shit. That's Florida for you. Great.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Anyways. You were talking to me at the beginning. You saw, now it's fucking crazy.
Whoa.
All right, hold it. Let me get this. All right, brother. Let's see here. Good to go. Ugh. All right. Sorry about that. Life on the golf.
That's all good.
All right.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. It's like got pitch black dark. All right. Here's the door. I'm gonna be like 10 minutes. There was a giant storm out, so it's about to piss down like crazy. Yeah. Sorry. All right, man. Here we go. Boom. All right. So, as we were talking about work capacity, that's the work that you're doing right now. I'm trying to think what else. So you're training work capacity. You like boxing. You gave us some good tips on clients. What is something that you feel like as far as like in the future, is there something that you're kind of leaning into? Is there a specific form of training you want to work yourself toward, or is there just something like else entirely that you're planning on doing? Any big trips that you're trying to do? You know, like hiking
Well,
wise?
honestly, right now, I've got a lot of study to do, so I'm doing that.
Gotcha.
Training wise, I'm just happy to be back with some barbell stuff. We're gonna have like a family road trip around Christmas probably. But big trips, I'm hoping to get back to the States next year to visit some family, and I'm hoping to get back up to British Columbia and do some more trekking with Kyle. And speaking
Ah,
of Kyle, I think it's his birthday over there, so happy birthday, Kyle.
oh, cool.
Um,
Yeah, he's awesome.
yeah, so oh yeah, he's the best of people. And it's been a year now since we were in the Himalayas, so it's definitely time for another adventure.
Oh,
But
cool.
yeah, I'm hoping maybe British Columbia. I need to get out more here. Uh, there's been talks about South America, but I don't know how feasible that is at this stage.
Yeah.
Right now, it's just like focus on my business and my focus on my strength training, get out as much as possible. It's spring here, so I'm doing a ton of gardening and I got an orchard going and all
Nice.
that jazz. And yeah, I mean, this is sort of a year of consolidation because everything kind of fell apart for most of 2020, and now I've got to spend some time trying to build again and reconstruct things and hopefully get out for some adventures in the new year.
Same, same. Wow, it'd be cool to go on a hike with you guys. Maybe.
Yeah, you have to go up to the north.
Oh yeah,
How are you with snow?
I've never been in snow, dude. Never been. In
What?
snow. Never, no. No, man. I'm
We
just
have we have snow down here in Australia.
no, dude. I'm in Florida, man. There's no snow over here, and I'm Hispanic, so everywhere that I visited, there's been no snow. I've been to Europe twice, when I was studying my biomechanics course, and I missed snow each time I was there. I was in Berlin, but
Oh wow.
yeah, I've never. I mean, it gets cold enough for where snow would fall in other regions here in Florida. Like it gets anywhere between the 30s and the 40s. Last winter it was in the 30s. A good number of days. From what I recall in my lifetime, but there'd be snow in other parts of the world, but it just never quite falls here because the climate conditions aren't perfect. For that to happen, but hey, if I was gonna see snow for the first time, it'd be cool to do it with one of you guys. I like the whole idea of like this
Yeah.
epic adventure lifestyle that you guys have adopted. For me here, big event is like going to a place with a trail in a spring. That's
That's
Florida.
cool though.
It's cool, yeah. Spring's
Yeah, I mean you got to
spring
take advantage of what you have.
for sure. Yeah, I mean we get spoiled with sunlight, so and
Yeah.
that's kind of what I appreciate a lot. But I would like to be in the cold and see what happens. Ancestrally, I'm not, of the north. I'm of the equator. Most of my genes
Yeah.
go to the equator, like Iberia, like Spain and stuff like that. So, but I've made a point to always expose myself to the cold for the last couple of years. Once I found out how important it was, to the most of my ability, like
Yeah.
minimal clothing and like 30, 40-degree weather and stuff like that, and really, really building the
Yeah.
adaptation. But that sounds good, man. A trip with
Nice.
Kyle, that sounds like a good time. In closing,
Yeah.
I want to ask something really important because I think I kind of like dissected you a bit. I think we got a lot of the best stuff out. Um, okay, uh, so you're doing barbell work and you're increasing work capacity. Well, I am curious as far as like ancient methodologies. You're training with the mace a little bit. Is there other tools you want to experiment with, and how's your experience been with training with the mace? Why did you decide to do that? I know Kyle swinged it too, and a couple other
Yeah.
mutual friends. So.
Yeah, I mean, I got into it from those mutuals, like people swinging this like rock on a stick on Instagram. I'm like, huh, that looks cool. I'm gonna get one of those. And I got into that probably around New Year or maybe just before end of 2019 or something, somewhere in there. And I just started playing around with it. It's just an interesting contraption. Like I like experimenting with things. I'm not beholden to one tradition of training. There's value in it. And I was like, cool, this is neat. And it got fun. And I got the hang of it. I'm like, this is really fun. This is, you know, it's challenging. It's meditative. I like the action of the mace. Like the kettlebell is very good as well. I really like kettlebell stuff. But the mace, just something about hitting that pendulum just right that makes your body sing. And you're like, oh, that was a good rep. Like that swing was just so nice. And
Mm,
then just being able to have something such a smooth action,
mm,
great. And so then I just started playing around with like making them. And because the world was shut down, I didn't have anything better to do. So I just bought, concrete and bamboo and just started making. Like I got short ones, I've got long ones, I've got really thick, fat ones with tiny sticks and ones that have like 3-inch bamboo handles and like all these different sizes and shapes. I got steel, and just like playing around with the stuff because I didn't have anything else for most of the last 6 months. Yeah, and that was really cool. As far as ancient methodologies, I actually, for me, training generally has to have an external implement. Like I find body weight stuff very tedious. I've done some calisthenics cycles and I just find it so boring. In the long run, I like to manipulate something.
It's pretty boring, yeah.
I do, man. I've tried and I'm like, God, this is boring. Like I'd almost rather not train than have to do push-ups and like front levers and crunches all day. It's like, fuck that. I'm gonna go for a walk. But most of my stuff, like anything that would be considered unconventional, generally comes from my background in combat sports. So lots of kettlebell stuff, a bit of like move nat, sort of natural movement flow type things as well. Other than like that, like ancient implements, I really like reading about alternative training styles. I have some really interesting books about like old school, like Queensberry rules, boxing training, and like what people used to do back when you wore, knickers and had giant mustaches and fought like this. And, I do have this book to get through a bit more. I've had a
great book.
Yeah, so that was a little hard to get, but I got a copy of that. And then, I had to look through that, what was it? The
5D bodybuilding.
The Indian Encyclopedia. Yeah, well, no, the Indian Encyclopedia of like training methods or whatever. That I think I sent you a link to that ages ago.
Did you send me that? Send me
I
that.
like that stuff.
I might have missed that one. Yeah, I might have missed that one.
Yeah, no, I'll send you another link. I've got that in my Dropbox. I like the physical culture stuff and reading about ancient physical culture. I think my problem is that often they require absurd repetitions and drinking liters of ghee every day. So that's a bit hard for me. I love the knowledge you can gain from that and how.
Yeah, I gave up.
Like it's good. It's valuable and it's neat. But yeah, there's only so many reps I can do before I'm like, I just need to lift something heavy, or I'm gonna get bored.
Definitely. Cool, man. Well, Zoom's gonna kick us out soon, but you got a client soon, right? You're working.
All right.
You got a client right after?
Yeah, I've got an online or a virtual client in a little bit.
Cool, man. I could talk to you again. We probably will. But thank you, man.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah, thank you. This is gonna go up on the Patreon for a little bit, and then I'm just gonna release it in full, and you can do whatever you want with it.
Nope.
But it was a pleasure talking with you, man.
Sounds good. Yeah, you too. And it was good to get the time figured out. It's pretty tricky when I'm on the other end of the world.
16 hours. This is a perfect time, actually, if we're going to talk. So
cool.
All right, brother. Well,
nice, man.
Enjoy your day. I'm going to go to bed, and you can get on with your day. All right, brother. See you.
All right, man. Take it easy.
Take care.